National Fishermen and Pacific Marine Expo are proud supporters of the Galley Stories podcast, as we make similar efforts to highlight the people and topics that define commercial fishing. You can see what that looks like in print and online all year long, as well as every November in Seattle when this community comes together at PME. Check out nationalfisherman.com and pacificmarineexpo.com to learn more.
Hey guys, this episode brought to you by Alaskan Brewing Company and Xtratuf boots. I know you guys both know who both of them are, but exciting episode is the first one released that Xtratuf has been on board with us. So welcome aboard, Xtratuf, and we will see you in, on, and around the water. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Galley Stories. Today we have a good friend of mine, an old friend of mine. We've been trying to do this for a long time. A lot of you know him by Wild Bill. Bill, how are you doing today?
Doing good here in South Carolina, and it's warm and sunny today. We've had a cold stretch, so
Boy, it's been nasty up here too.
we're in the 70s and sunny here on Lake Mary.
Nice. Bill, could you let us know what year you were born and how your upbringing was before you got into commercial fishing?
Oh, I was born in 57, youngest of three boys, Western Pennsylvania. I think I was probably the only guy on the show from east of the Mississippi. Um, Dad was upper blue collar. Mom was stay at home. Pretty big high school. My family, all my cousins and my brother, they were very athletic. We had two cousins went to college as quarterbacks, and my brother held track records for 10 years after he graduated. By the time all that came around, I didn't want anything to do with it. But I actually crashed my dad's car on homecoming night, and kind of a fast forward, I ended up skipping school on Monday and joining the Navy because it was a brand new car, still had the sticker on the window. But that was my exit from Pennsylvania.
Hold on, there's got to be more there, Bill. Just you borrowed your dad's car, or how did that go down?
No, it was just it was homecoming, and he came home, and I had the other family car all cleaned up, and he said, "Take the new one," and we were up to no good. So one thing led to another, and it started to rain and slid off the road actually it was in a cemetery and hit, I think, 13 tombstones and finally hit a big oak tree. So the
Sound
car
like
had to be lifted out with a crane. My dad was an ex-DI at Paris Island for the Marine Corps, so he had a pretty strong hand for authority. My friends, if they were at the house and they heard my dad pull up, they'd usually head out the back door. They didn't want to deal with him much, but that probably made me who I am today, so I can't complain too loud.
So you wrecked the car and ran off and joined the Navy.
That's kind of the Cliff Note version, but yeah, I mean, we were just, we were kids. We had raised bird dogs for hunting. We did Springer Spaniels, so we hunted, we fished. When I left PA through California and Idaho, I ended up settling in Washington because it reminded me a lot of Pennsylvania. There was a lot of outdoor activities, fishing and hunting. So, and then I guess if we want to get to it, I was playing billiards with a guy in Alki, and he had a brand new Camaro and a wad full of hundreds and whatever else, and he was kind of a clown. And I'm like, "Are you a criminal?" And he said, "No, I'm a crab fisherman." So that's how I got to be a crab fisherman.
Before we get to that, though, let's talk about your Navy experience. How long did you serve? And by the way, thank you for your service. How long did you serve, and what was that like?
I don't know if we really want to go into this. I ended up going to nuclear power school and shoved my division officer around. He was kind of a dimwit. He was a history major from Montana, and he stuttered. So my dad, the authority that I grew up with my dad, it took a lot for me to look up to somebody. And I guess looking back at it wasn't right, but I didn't really look up to this guy. And he was always giving me a hard time because he knew it. And one day he started shoving me, and naturally I shoved him back. And that's when people came walking around the corner, and that's what they saw was me shoving him. Nobody saw the first part. So they pulled me out of the nuclear submarine program. They said something in the order of my personality wasn't conducive to being confined spaces for extended periods of time, I think is what it said. And went to the conventional fleet. Went right from there, flew to the Philippines and did what they called a Westpac. And, we bounced around into Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, Guam. As a 19-year-old kid, it was a blast. Then we got back to Seattle and did an extended yard period there, and then ended up in San Diego. And I left from San Diego and went back up to Seattle because I really liked Washington. And that's kind of from there, well, that's how we led into the playing pool with the guy heading to Alaska.
What kind of boat were you on in the Navy?
It was a frigate, FF-1066.
FF-1066. And so that's your first experience on the water then, right?
Yeah, I mean, we Western Pennsylvania landlocked lakes and streams, but as a kid, the family, and pretty much 3-4 years there annually, we'd go to Virginia Beach. And I don't know, what was I, 15, 14 when it started? And I just kind of sat on the beach after having fun and looked out at the water and said, one way or another, I'm going to live and work on the water when it comes time. So that kind of led into the fact that when things went wrong, that was my escape. I ended up enlisting. So, but I've pretty much lived on the water ever since. I went through some training in Idaho, which is obviously landlocked, but other than that, I've lived in San Diego, Florida, Washington, Alaska. And well, even here, I'm looking out my window at the Lake Murray. So I get a little nervous if I can't see water.
Oh, I totally understand that. And my wife regrets that fact because our house costs a lot more being on water,
Yeah.
as you know. So on that, just to slow it down just a little bit, on the Navy boat, what was your first job on there?
Obviously, there's editing, right?
No, negative, no editing.
No, I was an electrician. Um, Being in the nuke field, they train you to be everything because if you're on a sub and something goes wrong, you have to be able to take over for the guys that maybe perished or whatever happens. So that was some of the best training I think a person could have because it gave me the ability to, when I got to the crab boats, to learn all the systems and figure out what the hell I was doing. But I was just a not just a 3-wire electrician. I was an electrician. It was Marvin Shields had a helicopter. We were made for chasing subs, ironically enough, and a lot of we had a helicopter attached. So there's a lot of lights, nav lights and everything on the deck that in salt water, you know how that goes. So stayed pretty busy with that. And honestly, I was in mid 70s, and a lot of the guys who were there above me a lot of them saw Vietnam, and it turned out to be a shoe shine and a haircut operation, which, I mean, there was a lot of people disgruntled when I was in about what it had become. It was just, I know it's all part of the game, but I was a hothead kid at the time, and it was hard for me to put up with it. So I did my job really well. And for that, I figured I should be able to get away with some stuff. An example is we had a yard period in Seattle to get all the deck lighting working for the helicopters. And I had a division officer that was, he started out in supply. So he didn't know which end of a voltmeter to use. But he was a little guy, and he was kind of the, what's his, Napoleon complex, and he'd always mess with me, but he couldn't fix anything. So I kind of had the upper hand on him, and I knew how important getting these lights working on deck was. So I made a deal with him. I said, when we stop in San Francisco, I have some friends that live down there. If I get all the deck lights working, which they've failed 3 years in a row to get them all working, I'm going to get, 7 to 10 days off that doesn't come off the books. And he agreed on it. We kind of shook on it. And when the inspection came before we left, all the lights were working except for one. And the guy's looking at it, writing it down. I went over and stomped on the deck near it, and it came back on. So every light was working. And after we threw lines in Seattle, we're heading to the Bay Area. And I said, I'm going to take some time off when we get there. And he goes, you're not going anywhere. It was kind of one of those deals. He kind of bullshitted me into making him look good. So when I got to the Bay Area, I went anyway. And that started a whole chain of pissing contests, I guess is the way you'd put it. But yeah, I don't know. It's in life on the boats, you do your job exceptionally well, you get away with stuff. At least that's my viewpoint.
All right. Obviously we'll stop talking about the Navy part, but thank you for your service on that. So back to the billiards. You're playing. He's got a lot of money. How did you progress to your first boat?
Well, we actually jumped in his brand new Camaro Z28, and we went from Alki Beach, where we were playing pool, over to Ballard Oil, basically at Pack Ship. And back then, the boats were making so much money. They would bring them home, drop them off, and the shipyard would shave and a haircut, paint job, and they were just getting ready to leave. So they were all pretty much done. And I don't think there's anything prettier than a crab boat that just had a fresh paint job, new deck, cleaned up, squared away, and they were lined up. And he was explaining to me the kind of money guys were making, and I was just thrilled. And I tried to get on. At that time, I was working for a port engineer for a tugboat company, Marine Logistics, MLC. And in the mid to late 70s, if you weren't related to somebody, went to Ballard High, cousin, uncle, grandfather had a boat, it was pretty tough to get on. I mean, those jobs they were highly sought after. So I tried and couldn't get on. So reluctantly, I didn't have a boat. They all took off for the season. And so I had a brainstorm that I went and I signed up with one of the seafood companies, Alaska, and they had a big 350-foot knot class ship. And I signed on as an electrician because that's what I knew. And the whole time I was on the boat, obviously performing the tasks that it took to, keep that thing running. When the crab boats would come in, most guys didn't understand electricity. So usually almost every boat that come in, I had to jump down on it and look at something, fix it, repair it. And after a while, I just used that as a leverage tool. I got to meet some of these guys. And the one boat, it was pretty much every time we come in, it was called the Coastal Glacier, which ended up being the pace setter, which actually rolled over, and all souls were lost on that one after I'd gotten off. But yeah, it was Tom Dundas was the captain, and it was pretty much an all Oregon crew, real tight bunch, 2 sets of brothers. And trust me, they weren't easy on me. The one guy was pitcher for the University of Washington. That was Tom. The other captain was state wrestling champ at Oregon at college. The brothers were fishing since they were kids. So that was my break-in for crab fishing, and stayed with them for a while and moved on. And this is kind of a strange story. The second boat was the Francis Lee. So the first one rolled over after I got off. Francis Lee, there's pretty famous footage of that anchored up outside St. Paul. They anchored up, had problems. They didn't have the proper antifreeze in the engines, is kind of what I'm thinking. Everything froze up. The weather turned, and big sheets of ice were just coming over the deck. And there's some footage of the crew. They all got rescued, but pulling them out of the water, chunks of ice coming together. It was pretty dramatic. They were all saved on that one. And so I'd gotten off that boat, and that happened. And the third boat I was on was the Francis Lee out of Kodiak. And that was a tough, hard-headed bunch out of Kodiak. And after I got off, they ran aground in Prince William Sound salmon tendering, and they went down. So it was getting to be kind of weird, 3 for 3, I get off and the boat sinks. So I don't really tell that story too often because that wouldn't make you very desirable as a crewman. And then I actually put one on the rocks at St. Paul. Had the steering ram problem, and we thought we fixed it, and it was blowing 70, 80, 90 like it does in St. Paul. And I ended up clipping the end of the reef. I was taking some fuel filters to a tugboat that was stuck out there because he didn't have any fuel filters, and steering kind of went out, got blown up on the reef, and that was called the Chivac, which we got everybody off, but they ended up sinking that one later. So yeah, I had a run for a while.
What was your first job though on the crab boat?
Well, I started out as engineer, so I've never been half share. Even before I got on the boat, I had that drive, physical, mental, and I was engineer deckhand, obviously, and they wanted to put me on the stack, new guy on the stack, and I said, no, I'm not going up there. We have a problem. Um, somebody, I need to be down here to hit the engine and fix it or whatever. So most guys, green guy will start out doing bait on the stack. I did do bait for a while, but then kind of convinced everybody that we were going to split that up and share it, because bait sucks. So I don't know. I took the job by the horns from the very first boat I was on. So I didn't really play the greenhorn that much.
All right. So how did your progression go? How did you move to the wheelhouse?
Well, I guess there's one more story here that when when we got to Dutch Harbor, the first trip we were going to go fish Opies, it was 3 a.m. We were out on the spit. There was an old dock out there where they'd load crab pots before. This was all before all the renovations, and we were tied up to a knot class ship. Again, same like the Sea Alaskan, and it was blowing 60, 80, gusts over 100 like it does in Dutch. Cold, everything's iced up. They refused to load pots for, we were trying to get everything together because you could take pots out before the season. And the captain said, go see if those guys are out on the dock, see if they unload pots yet. And at 3 a.m, nobody around. I was climbing from one boat to the other, and I fell 16 feet between the two boats into the water. And the bay was somewhat frozen. So I kind of went through the ice. And, you always hear the stories that you go in the water, you're not coming back. Well, I remember my hat coming off, and I swam after that. And then I looked at it, and I was water safety instructor in school, so I thought I was a pretty good swimmer. So I decided I was going to swim to the beach because I knew I had to get out of the water. And you could have pretty much water skied behind my ass the way I was swimming to the beach. And there was a boat tied up. There was more than one boat alongside the knot class ship. So I saw a guy on deck, and I screamed, and he was dumping some food over the side, like a cook might do. And he didn't hear me at first. Then I screamed again. It was kind of hard because it was tough to get your breath. And he heard me, and the guys got me out. And I thought, shit, I worked so hard to get here, I'm going to lose my job. So I went down into the galley. I'm pretty much in for maybe 15 minutes, 12 minutes. I don't know. And I was stripping clothes when I hit the deck. I went into my stateroom, put all new dry clothes on, and I'm back out in the galley saying, well, I'll go across and see if they're, and the captain's like, no, you got to warm up, dude. But I thought that was going to be my first job come and gone in the first time we hit port, but didn't work that way. So just kind of everything went pretty good. I learned a lot from those guys who made a lot of money, especially at the time. They were pretty efficient in their operation, and things just gradually went where, you're always improving yourself on your boats. And those guys, they kind of broke up the crew a little bit. And I was on like I said, the Francis Lee, and that was slow and steady. And after that, the trolling market, the JV Pollock market was really hotter than hell. So I was working part-time at the shipyard in Seattle, and I ended up finding a job on one of the Swassen boats. They're pretty famous. What was it? North Star, Arctic Star, Starfleet. Henry Swassen, a pretty successful Norwegian man. But I got on there as engineer and rode that out for a while, made some decent money, but it was, you're not on deck a lot. You're not working hard. You're just hauling the gear. Unless he tears up, you're just not doing anything. And maybe it was the wrong way to go, but I got out of that industry because those guys are still making great money. And then went on with Joe Waby on a combination trawler crabber. And he gave me my first shot at the wheelhouse to finish up a Paradise season for him. And then my buddy Cale Garcia, he had the Aquila and the partners in the TVAC. He called me and said, "Hey, you want to take this thing for crab?" And there was a lot of opies to catch. I think first year we caught 2.7 million pounds or something crazy. I don't know what it was, but maybe it was 1.7. But we were fishing for opies until July, I think, or end of June, taking the crab pots off and throwing the tender gear on and leaving right from Dutch to go up to Bristol Bay to tender. So whatever the timing is on that, it's been a long time. I don't recall, but back then it was working 8, 9, 10 months a year on the boat. So that, that was my first gig. And then later on, I think we just came back from Blue King, and we're delivering to St. Paul. And that's when the accident happened. And after that, I thought, oh, hell, I'm never getting another job. We get home and I got a call from the Hoyker brothers.
Hold on. Let's go back to the accident.
What about it?
Well, tell us about it. What happened?
We were trying to deliver these filters, and the steering ram, the plunger had come out of the steering ram, and through us trying to troubleshoot it, it kind of hung on, and it worked for a while, and we took off, but it wasn't the same under pressure tension. So we get out there and it's blowing, and I'm trying to maneuver in north of the beach and give these guys their filters, and obviously the ram failed again, and the rudder only went one direction. It wasn't set up where one rudder would run it. Both rudders had to be, it's the way they do the hydraulics where the fluid goes. But I wasn't able to get out of there. We tried with the engines, and we ended up getting blown up on the reef. And Coast Guard was there. It was the weather was so shitty, they were anchored up too, which you don't see those guys hiding out too often. And that was, what was it called, Black Sunday or whatever the hell it was. There were, I think, throughout the fleet, there might have been 6 or 7 boats. The other ones were at sea. There might have been one other guy that lost his anchor and went to the beach. But that was like one of the worst weekends for the crab boat industry, as much as you look at it like that. But there were quite a few lives lost that weekend, and we lost the boat. So we got off into the skiff with the Coast Guard, which was pretty funny because they went through one skiff. The guy ran right into the side of us and blew up, it was inflatable, hardened bottom inflatable, blew that one up. They took it back and brought another one in to get us off. But when you're sitting on the bottom, you're not going to, we had water in the engine room, but it wasn't like we were going down completely. So yeah, that's not the high point of my life, but I want to say that was in 88 or 89. And from there, I got to work with the Hoyker brothers. They had a boat that was brand new, and Oregon boys, they called me, and hell, I worked for them for 13 or 14 years, crabbing, salmon tendering. 5 brothers and 1 sister, and they're still real active in the game. They own a bunch of boats. They were really smart businessmen. Oregon rednecks. They were kind of wild to work with. Fun bunch of guys.
What has been your best day at sea, Bill? Go ahead and take a drink. What's been your best day at sea?
Getting on the airplane and watching Dutch Harbor get real small out the window. I've done this for that's a lot of years, 40 some years. And, you know, my first king crab fishery was a blue crab, St. Matthews. And I had fished the year before with Joe Waby, and we crushed them. We did great. And the next year I ended up running the boat, running the Chivac, and we were Peter Pan. I want to say, how many boats did they have? Back then, I think there were 318 or something overall, and I want to say we might have had 52. I was the high boat for Peter Pan my first season as the captain. So we had caught more blue king than anybody else in our fleet. So that felt pretty good. That was, and I mean, talk about catching the bug, that was the bug. So, and I mean,
tell us about blue king just a little bit, because we don't get that a lot.
well, blue king was, you'd have to hustle from salmon tendering and go up to Bristol Bay, go up to St. Matthews, which is quite a ways up there. So you're still looking at, possibly, oh, wait. Okay. So I guess the best way to describe blue king is they're kind of like brown crab. They're living in the rocks. They're real active. We would haul the pots twice or three times a day, so they didn't crawl out of the pots. It's real shallow, unlike red king. So they're up in the rock piles, and they're not very resilient. You change the salinity of their water, aka by running to town, or guys used to have a situation with a lot of dead loss because blue crab were a little more sensitive. And personally, red crab were a little more, as far as the quality of the meat, I thought red crab was a little more tender because blue crab, I think they were more athletic, so to speak. That would, that's kind of makes a muscle tough, but it was one of those fisheries. I want to say we had little boats, anything under 125 might have had 40 pots, and the guys over 125 feet might have had 60. I mean, I haven't fished that fishery. I might have done it one other time after that. That was in the early 90s. So it's not a fishery that has come back or wasn't sustained, but yeah, it's a different one, and it's usually but back then we would catch the blue king. Then when we go for Baradai, and then we'd have the red king. Then we'd have a Pelio, we ended up being the east-west, and you could haul crab pots for a good part of the year. And that's what we did. I think one year I was on the boat 10 and a half months between salmon tendering and crab fishing. So yeah, we used to work hard, made good money, but as far as life goes, when I was a kid, most of the arguments around the house were not enough money. So I always thought I'm going to have a great operation, great family life if I can, put enough money in the house not to have these arguments. And in a way, I got obsessed with it, and I was just about making more, and you strive to get on these great boats, and crab fishing has taken some dips here and there, and you get used to making, back then 150, which it's probably like 400 now. And all of a sudden they closed king crab. I don't know how many years ago it was, but that was really devastating. So then I switched over and I started seining for salmon out of Sandpoint, little community. For a while, they had more millionaires per capita than anywhere else in the United States because of this salmon industry. They would also fish crab out of there, which 58-foot boat would have crew shares as big or bigger than us, and they would just have a really short season, But these guys were all locals, That was pretty wild. That was a good time in life. We called it Aleut Alley, the one section of the dock where it was all local boys, the best part. And Sandpoint had a beautiful harbor, and because they made a lot of money there, and some tough characters. It was tough to get in, but these guys, if you'd have a big salmon season, you'd make 35, some of them closer to 40. And then I want to say my buddy Murray had made 58,000 king crab one year on top of a 35. and then they'd fish a little bit of barrett eye. Some guys would go do herring. So, you can make 100 plus in 6 months. I mean, that was kind of the goal and the norm. But and then they quit fishing. They shut king crab down there too. So then I went back to the big boats again. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind. Chasing the fisheries. I've fished a bunch of them. I did drug for pollock, did all the crab, tendered herring, which that could be exciting. We made some pretty good money at that. You could be aggressive and make some money in herring, and then long grinds of salmon, where I don't want to say 105 days tendering salmon out of Port Muller. I've worked a lot in these years, and done pretty well. Wine, women, and song. The rest of it you pee away, but that's pretty standard.
Yeah. Well, I've known you for a while, and I know you work hard at everything you do. Everything you do. Um, God, I'm trying to think of my next question, Bill. Um, what has been your worst day at sea? Your worst day?
Probably the
I think I
well,
was there, maybe.
there's a handful. Probably the day that the steering went out. I actually, here it is. I'm running a boat, and it's gone. It's lost. I thought my career was ending, and I thought I was on this rise to what I hoped would be, I don't know if fame's the right word, but just success. And boats on the reef. It was a pretty ugly situation there. And another bad day was and it wasn't that many years ago. I had uh, one guy go over the side. We got him out through training and just a great crew. He was hardly completely wet when we got him out, but that was pretty wild. Spencer was the son of a buddy of mine that we fished as partners prior, and we get to the point where the kids are getting old enough to go out on the boats, and yeah, there was a lot of stuff going through my mind when I watched him go over the rail. But happy to say my boys got him out, yanked him out of the water, and dried him off, and kept going. But yeah, I mean, you don't ever want to lose anybody. I'm fortunate enough that I never had that. I've had a lot of friends that ran boats, and well, there's been total losses, and everybody knows all those stories. But just the single guy going over and not getting him back, that's to not bring somebody's child or husband or the husband back home, or brother or friend. I'm glad I never had to do that. Of all these years I've fished, never lost anybody.
Yep. Knock on some wood. Knock on some wood. What about your son, Zach?
Zach, he's a smartass, just like I was. And when I first, he got to age and he's going through college, and I know how it goes. His grades anymore with college, you have to be like a 4.0 plus to really hit the home run out of college. And he's moving along. He's doing okay, but he's not digging it. So I had an opportunity to bring him up, and he just, I don't know. It's some people can't work with their kids, and I don't know that I could have ever worked for my father either. But I kind of ruled with the iron hand like I was taught. And Zach grew up in Seattle, where Seattle's a little different. It's always been a little different. It's really different now, but it's like the home of the appreciation trophy, or whatever you want to say. And that's not the lifestyle that I led. So one thing led to another, and he had some demands, and I wasn't willing to do it. So he moved on. I mean, we're close now. In fact, I'm trying to get out of South Carolina and head down we have a little home down in Sonora, Mexico, and Zach found a wife, and he just had a baby girl. So we're taking care of some medical stuff that we're going through, and we're going to head down there in the middle of next month. So
He, I know Zach pretty well, really well, actually. He respects you. He loves you. I know you do him too. I know sometimes on TV they put stuff up different, but I know you both are incredibly proud of each other. So, man, what a young man you have raised.
Well, I'll be honest. His mom started the process, and she started with the seedling, and I ended up with the young plant. And had to take it out of the pot that it was in and put it in a bigger pot and show him some more stuff. But you
Somebody's
know,
farming. Somebody's
yeah.
farming down in North Carolina.
Well, South Carolina, yeah, we've got stuff growing everywhere around here. It's crazy. We're making bread and drying fruit. It's been a weird circle. It's life's pretty nice down here. It's a little quieter, a little slower, but Zach's done really well. He's found a home with the Dwyers that it's a perfect spot for him. They're amazing, amazing people, and they have the same mindset. I'm happy to see him doing well. And he actually was able to skip some time and stay home with his newborn. So he's home right now for a while. I think he's going to probably go back come June for salmon. And it was funny because when he was growing up, he's like, "Oh, you were never home for me." Well, lo and behold, he's a commercial fisherman now, and he's experiencing the same thing that he had experienced with me, if that makes sense. Now he's on the boat and gone, and that long distance thing is very tough to do. I mean, it's really hard to be gone all the time and maintain a family and a relationship. And some people are really good at it, and some aren't.
Well, he's a fun young man.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing. He's sarcastic as they come. It's pretty funny.
All right, Bill. So where are you going next? Because I haven't seen you on Discovery lately. How's the health? How are you doing?
Well, I've been following that. I've been following that prostate thing for a while, and I knew I had to do something about it. Well, it got to the point where we had to take steps, and we ended up doing as a treatment. We did the radioactive seeds and the hormone deal where it drops your testosterone to virtually zero, and ideally the numbers look great. The cancer's under control, but it's kind of taking its toll. It's to mess with the body, like they do in the treatment. It's pretty hard. You're not the same. I've kind of felt lately, as I can surmise this, that in the last year and a half, I feel like I've aged about 10 years. I've always felt like I hung with my younger crew, and the mindset and how active I was and what I would do. I was a lot younger than my actual years, and lately it's starting to feel like it's catching up.
Boy, it catches up with all of us, of course. Of course. Um, you have lost a couple crew members. I just want to bring up Nick, if you don't mind, because I love Nick a lot, and I know you did too. Can we talk about him for just a minute?
Sure. He was at times Nick McGlosson. I think he started when he was about 11 or something on crab boats with his dad. At times, I would say he was probably one of the, if not the best deckhands in Alaska. He was phenomenal at what he did. I called him the Pied Piper because he could always rally the crew. And, when it would get tough and cold, and everybody would be slowing down, and Nick would speed up to make up for what everybody else was doing. But that Pied Piper thing, it worked both ways. If Nick was on the wrong road, he would Pied Piper the guys down the dark alley. But no, we had a pretty wild relationship. I put a lot of time and effort into keeping him around. There were some tough times where I could see him from 100 yards and know that he was up to no good, and he knew I did. But his father, Bruce, he and Zach had a great relationship. They worked together for a while, and I had a great relationship with Nick. Nick didn't really like working with Dad, Zach didn't like working for me. That was a bit of irony. I think, Bruce's job was a lot easier than mine because I was dealing with Nick. But his father and I always said that it's not if I'm going to get a call about Nick on, the worst of the worst, which happened. It was just going to be when. He, like a lot of these guys, through injury or just self-entertainment, they get starting to do the drugs, whether it was starting out with, the road, and they get a little taste of oxy because they're banged up and broken ribs, broken ankle or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's a drug of choice. And seems like once they got hooked up with it, it never goes away. But I was able to, keep them together. And the first real landmark was a year sober. And I think it was a year and probably 2 hours he went off the wagon. And then the next, we got through that, which was tough. And then the next one was 2 years. And it was pretty much the same thing. We hit that 2 year mark. And then after that, it was pretty much when he was on the boat, I could trust him. And I mean, he was an amazing deckhand. He was the perfect right hand. And, he ended up teaching Landon or brought Landon on. And, Landon had his issues, but nowhere near what Nick had been through. And after Nick passed, Landon ended up being my number two. And
what an amazing number two.
Oh, I know. Landon is sick. He's an amazing kid. And
I interviewed him, and he was like so eloquent, so well spoken, but way more humble. Like, extremely humble.
It's kind of hard he looks like mom and apple pie. He just looks like
he smells like it too.
Yeah, but he's seen the rough side of the road too. And he's doing great. He's got this gal that he was a runner for a while, but he's got this gal that he's really in love with, and I think they're starting to talk about maybe having a family. And I mean, I could leave the boat with him, and I just got nothing but great reviews, and everybody bragged about him and how he, great at the tendering thing. And, we kind of had a rough cod season, and the one company, they had financial difficulties, and won't go into that too much, but we didn't get paid for a bunch of cod, which that comes out everybody. I think we paid the crew almost everything they had coming, which was hard on us as owners. And then the next year, we'd been on the show, so I was subsidizing all the crew, especially Landon, because he was a major part of it. Well, with no cod to fish and a minimal crab quota, Discovery didn't bring us back the second half of last year, which these guys live check to check, and all of a sudden that money went away. We didn't get paid for cod. So I was going through the cancer stuff, so I kind of disbanded the group. I said, I know you guys got to make money. Landon just bought some high zoo Raptor pickup or something, and these guys, they come home and they made 80,000, they spend 95. I was no different. So next thing you know, now he's off and running, working for somebody else, and it's been kind of a turning point for me because it's hard to put a crew together. It's hard to put a crew together that you can trust, put a crew together that is knowledgeable, put a crew together that they're good to live with, because after you do this for 40, 50 years, you got guys with bad habits, bad hygiene or whatever. I'll be honest, you don't want to live that way. And I've been lucky enough over the years, the last few, especially since Landon's been in there, and while Nick was there, we've had a great bunch of guys, but I couldn't pay them enough to keep going because we didn't have enough to fish for. This quota system, I'm sure there's been enough guys on your podcast, people understand how that works, but we didn't have great numbers to catch, and a lot of it was least crab, where the boat that catches it, you get some reward, but it's not what you might think. So I kind of told the guys, if you're going to find something, go ahead. So, yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard. I didn't do Red King this year. We had somebody else come in, and they ended up they broke some pipes in the tank. I don't know if they were. It's hard to say. You take all these precautions. You're looking the tank when you're filling, but they had a couple pipes break in the tank, and they had horrific dead loss. It was like virtually all the all the profit for the boat. The people that we leased from got paid. I think we paid the crew. I don't know. Yeah, we did, because for my quota that I own, I got some money. But yeah, it's been a real weird ending. It's between you lose Nick, um, the bank. We had a big cod season going on. It's fast and furious, and we fish hard, we fish well, and we had a lot going in. We started late and finished early, and still we were up in the numbers. And then not getting paid. I've been there before. The Bering Trader years ago, we were catching 60 to 80 ton of codfish a day with 3 guys on deck, and we're bleeding each one. And we did that for, I want to say, 3.5 weeks. And you're fishing every day. When do you get paid for that? That was back in the 90s. They went under. So I had been through it once before. It hurts. It hurts. And the boat I was on wasn't in the situation to give us anything. So we didn't make any money then. But this lifestyle, this way to make a living, it's been some of the high points, and then there's the rest of the time. But it's what it is. You're 1099. You're self-employed. You got to go out, and the more you make, the harder you work, the more you make, the more you catch, the more you make.
What would you change?
I don't know. It's hard to say you want to change
about
anything.
your life. What would you change?
Oh, I don't know. There's been some pretty close stuff happen. I can't picture one thing that I would absolutely do differently. We can all look at the little mistakes you made, like car accidents and fights and, getting in trouble here and there, but, it's not enough to change your life for. So I don't know. Life's been good. Maybe one thing I would have changed is I wouldn't have worried about working so hard. I mean, working so many hours when, Zach and his brother were young. Because back then I was working 7.5 to 10.5 months a year, and everything happens for a reason. Kids were doing good. They're in private school. You buy them a baseball glove, it's top of the line. They got ski equipment, it's all the good stuff, and that's the Seattle world. You got to maintain that, but that's probably the thing that wasn't worth it. Being that many hours on the boat and not being around. But like I said, life's continued on. I'm really enjoying myself now. I have a pretty cool situation going on. Got a great girlfriend. We got a nice house on a lake in South Carolina. Bought this thing right. I'm usually buy high, sell low. We got this right at the beginning of COVID, which it was a pretty fantastic deal, because in this area anyway, real estate's doing well. And then prior to that, 23 years, I've had property down in Sonora, Mexico, which is pretty cool. It's not like a border town. But it's not like Cabo. It's just a quiet little Mexican town that has some fishing and plenty of places to eat and have a cerveza on the beach. In fact, we're trying to head there now. But I can't really bitch about the way life's turning out, other than dealing with the health issues.
Well, I'm sure you're going to get through those. I pray you're going to get through those.
It was a month or so ago. I just started putting on all this weight. Everything was swelling, and I went in and they said, well, we need to send you a cardiologist. And the cliff note on that one is I had AFib going on, where I think my heartbeat was going anywhere between 140 and 180 a minute. And, I'd put on, in 5 days, I think I put on 7 or 8 pounds, and everything was tight. They put me in the hospital for 7 or 8 days. I got in there at 284, 285, and I got out a week later at 244. They just had me, they got me squared away with the heartbeat, and they had me on IVs with diuretics, I guess, and they got all this extra water off me. But that was pretty wild, losing 40 pounds in a week.
Yeah, like you're leaking. You got holes in you, Bill. What would be your advice for young guys coming in? Would you have
Don't,
any for that?
don't.
Really?
I mean, what you're involved? What fishery do you think is healthy right now?
Right now, I'd say pollock.
Yeah.
Cod is extremely healthy.
Well, not healthy enough that we got paid for the
Well,
stuff we caught. And I know that's a different subject, but
I
the
think I
pollock
think
guys,
I think cod
it's
is
all
profitable,
politics.
but
Say again?
I think cod and pollock are both profitable, and I hope that salmon is next year.
But it's a sine wave where the availability, profitability, market. Back when I fished all the different crabs and salmon, herring, tendering. One would be low. We'd have a bad bear die year, or they pretty much want to close bear die. But then king crab price would be high, and the quota would be good. And then when Opelio had those huge numbers, those quotas back then, the harder you worked, the more you made, and we sure worked our ass off. I'm thinking back. I think we had 1.73 million the first year. I ran the Chivac. Now that I think about it, that was my virgin year for hauling Opie pots, which was a pretty good number. But now it seems like there's a lot of down cycles. And the way that I'll be honest, the way the quota system goes, there's a lot of guys that never hauled a crab pot in their life that have huge quotas. Just face it, they're business savvy. I wasn't one of those guys. I was a guy that wanted to go out, and I had no parents. I had no family that was involved in fishing. I didn't go to Ballard High. I didn't have uncles that had boats and quota, and I just came in and kind of fought my way to the wheelhouse, and through performance tried to make some money. But they didn't reward guys like us. Like I said, I had 1.73 million pounds Opies, and I got a tiny amount of quota. And in a way, that's kind of the downside of the fishery. You got the guy that has the business, the guy that owns the house makes the money when it sells. And if you're a renter, you don't get nothing. And that's kind of the analogy, the way it's worked out pretty much so far. But I know what I used to make as a deckhand. I know what I'm made for years and years. And, it's hard to pay these guys. Insurance has gone through the roof. Fuel is ridiculous. Food in Alaska is absurd. Insurance is one of the worst ones. I mean, face it, it's not if somebody's going to get hurt, it's when they're going to get hurt. And I don't want to sound like a downer on the fishery, because there's nothing more exciting than you're on a seiner and you close up the net and you start hauling back, and it's just filled with salmon, and you're screaming and hollering, or you pull that crab pot that's loaded with king crab. I mean, that's some of the finest feelings you'd ever. That's some of the best times in your life, But anymore, it's like few and far between, or if there is an abundance, there's too much. The market says we got too much on the market, we can't pay. But
Too much, too little, too.
yeah, there's always, like I said, that cycle always for years and years. I've done this 40 some years. One would be low, two would be high. There was always, and I fished enough fisheries that things always came together. And then, we had to run on the show, and with smaller quotas. I mean, the first year I was on the show, I had 253,000 pounds of king crab to catch. And back then, that went long enough that they're like, all right, enough. We're pulling the crew off the boat. We have way more than enough footage. And then when you're down to like 28,000 or 30,000 pounds of king crab, it's pretty tough to put a show together out of that, and I've always been one that wanted everything to be me and the crew doing what we do. And it got a little tougher to do that. I mean, they still do a great job. They raised the bar with cinematography, and the show's pretty amazing. There's only a couple that have been around, and I'm really proud of the fact that I was on it. But I don't see the return. I don't see that I'm going back. And the one thing about the show is it opened a lot of doors. I mean, I've been hanging with NASCAR guys, backstage at country songs, in the pace car, NASCAR, sport fishing, or Costa Rica, Panama, because of the show. And I think the byproduct of being on it, the things that have happened because I was on it, are more rewarding than being on it. It's notoriety is kind of wild. I mean, I'm in South Carolina, and first of all, nobody believes. Why would I be here? So that's probably the question I get the most. Is it you? Yeah, it was this morning. What are you doing here? I'm buying groceries. What's it look like? You try to be nice, and I am nice. You won't see too many people say that, unless some barroom situations years ago, but you won't see too many people say that I've been less than sweet when the conversation comes up in airports, in the stores, in restaurants. I go out of my way, because if it wasn't for those people, they wouldn't have had a show. But
Bill,
I did run into a guy, and I ran into a guy in Florida here a few months ago that introduced himself, and he said, "Do you remember me in 2018 or whatever?" I'm like, "Not really." He goes, "Well, I said something smart, and you slapped me in the face." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't remember." Sure, it was me, but no, for the most part, the notoriety's been cool. I've gotten to do a lot of cool stuff and done some charity work from it along the way. It's nice to give back a little when you get it.
Where do you go from here, Bill?
Honestly,
And life-wise,
I'm trying to figure out. There was a big chunk that disappeared between the dead loss, the cod season. I mean the cod season, and the show going away 6 months premature for me. So I thought things were pretty much lined out, that I didn't have to do much. I was just I messed around. I'd buy and sell cars. I flipped cars. Done some fun stuff. I had one that went to Barrett Jackson that brought
I saw that fucking Bronco. I saw that Bronco
Blazer.
Blazer. I saw it.
Yeah, it. I put a ton of money in to do it, and it took almost 2 years to do it. But it was like a pretty cool moment standing on the stage when this 1972 vehicle goes across and sells for $300,000, and there's a 10% surcharge. So the guy that bought it spent $330,000 for this. I mean, I had in the mid to upper twos in it, and there was some expenses going back and forth for it. So it wasn't like I made hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, but it was, again, I like flipping cars. I like the automobile world and trucks. And in fact, I don't know what I got around here. I got about 8 of them in my yard here, 8 or 9 vehicles. And I got 5 or 6 down in Mexico. But I kind of wanted to do that, get into the car biz. But with the economy the way it's been lately, and fuel prices and everything, the car biz has kind of taken a siesta for a while. So we'll see what happens. I'll find something to do.
I'm sure you will, Bill. So if this is your final recording, what would you say?
No,
That's a tough question, I know, but
basically everybody's so worried about this and that and whose feelings are hurt. I mean, the world has kind of gotten pretty weird with all that when I look at it, because I'm from a hardcore background with my dad. I mean, when I started crab fishing, I remember my first job, they were just working me over because I was new and I didn't know what I was doing. So I was slowing them down, and I'd get hit with the throwing hook, or somebody pushed me down, and, you had to fight your way back. But there's something about, I know no people aren't going to go, oh, you shouldn't have to do that, but it builds character. I mean, it makes you who you are. And you're not somebody that wants to pass it down like some of these colleges do with a hazing or whatever, but there's some times life can be tough, and you should stand up for that. And I mean, the way, I don't know, just all the homeless taking over, and I don't want to get into the politics of that, but I'm a guy that the harder you work, the more you make. And if you don't work, you're not making anything. And you sure as hell shouldn't get it handed to you, because I sure as hell don't want to pay for it. But I guess that'll come on another day. But yeah, we don't want to go into that one. But I guess my thing is just work hard, treat people well, and you'll be respected and people treat you well. I mean, yeah, it's the current political state. I have a hard time with it. But, life goes on. I'm sure there were periods where people said the same thing, like when music was transpiring, my dad, what are you listening to? That kind of thing. There's some stuff I hear now that I don't agree with, but I guess music kind of mimics life, just the next step.
Life goes on.
Yeah. The next step might piss off the other guys. So.
Well, Bill, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today.
We've been at it for a while.
We've tried this like 5 times, I think.
I know. Well, you were supposed to come to South Carolina, and then I got tied up. And you need to get your passport. This would have been a lot more fun to do on the beach in Mexico, but
boy, maybe part 2.
Yeah.
All right, man. I love you.
Okay, take care, brother.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks for listening to Galley Stories. We hope you like what the net brought in. Please leave us a review on iTunes. Whether you like it or not, we're not fishing for compliments. Look us up on Facebook and Twitter too, and reach out to us at galleystories@gmail.com.